Welcome back to the Views from the Gravel Lot podcast. Today we are previewing week one of the NFL season. It's a fun time to be back. Football's back. Bills Cardinals, a lot to get into. But first, I want to introduce our guest onto the podcast. Jesus, big Cardinals guy. Check him out. Um, Obviously, big fan of what you do. Just kind of tell us where we can find your stuff, and then we'll kind of just jump right into it.
Yeah, so pretty much everywhere is Cardinals update. Yeah, just basically just talk about the Cardinals and do what you guys do, have a podcast and just post up out there. Just trying to hype up the fans for this season, for this team going forward. Just because we're in a transition stage right now. Obviously, with last year, a bunch of new faces in the building, but now, we're trying to get the ball moving onto, progressing on the next stage of our rebuild.
Definitely, and I think there's a lot to be excited about, and I'm very bullish on the Cardinals myself, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. Talk about some of the players on the team who I think don't really get the praise and the credit they deserve. But yeah, thanks for having us on. Obviously, we'll have all of his links in the description and everything. You can check him out if you want to, stay in tune with the Cardinals. He does a great job. So first, I
Thank
want
you.
to start out by, talking about some of the X factors in this game. This is a very interesting game because week one is, by a lot of people, consider it an extension of the preseason. A lot of people don't know what to expect in week one. There's a lot of upsets. There's a lot of, scenarios where these are trap games. And I think the Cardinals have the ability to beat the Bills if things go their way. And obviously the game plan falls the way they need it to. But I want to start with you, Jesus. There's X factors on each side of the ball, but I'm going to
Mhm.
give you, one player on each side of the ball. Who is an X factor for you on the Cardinals on offense and then on defense, like in terms of beating the Bills? Who's a player that can step up and kind of surprise people in those areas?
So for me, I'll go ahead and start for the offense. Obviously, Kyler, I think is default. He's the X factor just because going back to last season, you saw how the first half of the season Kyler wasn't in the he wasn't playing, and just how the offense looked. It just looked real, hit or miss at times. And then when he got into the lineup, he was playing near 500 ball. He had a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, and he was just able to make the offense more electric and just do what Kyler does with his rushing ability, with his ball placement, with his accuracy and stuff like that. So I think he's a default X factor, and we haven't seen him at all this preseason. So everything's been pretty much through training camp, through joint practices with the Colts, and he looks like he's doing great. It just the past couple of training camps, obviously this last one he was out with the ACL, but even before that, the year prior, he had like an elbow injury. The year before that, he started off with COVID in the training camp. So this is like the first training camp pretty much since his rookie or his sophomore season where he's actually just pretty much healthy, right? There's no little nagging injuries. There's no something that's happening that kind of just throws off his mojo and stuff like that. He's able to come in, take all the first team reps, and hopefully we're able to see it on Sunday. And then for defense, I would say there's not one person in my eyes. I think it's like one position group. I think it's the defensive line. Just because there's a lot of new faces, there's a lot of new guys from last year. We basically have a whole new wave of defensive linemen that we just didn't have last year. Last year we ended the season with an undrafted guy, a 6th round rookie, and stuff like that playing defensive line. So now we have someone like a Bilal Nichols, like a Justin Jones, and depending on who's going to be in and out of the lineup, we have some guys that were just maybe injured last year, like an LJ Collier. So it seems like an underrated group, but I think having a bunch of people just rotating in and out is going to be a key thing, especially stopping Josh Allen and the Bills. You guys, we'll need everyone on the defensive line just to play their hearts out, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna go to Mike now. Obviously, you're gonna give us for the Bills now. Who do you think is kind of that X factor for the Bills?
Feel like in the same sense of what he was saying, another by default X factor is going to be Josh Allen, obviously, because dual threat as well, and just see what he can really do with like the receiver room and everything. And I feel like the biggest X factor for the offense for me has to be Khalil Shakir. I mean, he really, if he goes off and he has a really big game, a lot of catches, a lot of yards, just see what it makes the offense look like and how that flows. And I think a big defensive X factor for us is going to be Terrell Bernard and see how he can, do being the new Mike of the defense with Matt Milano out.
Yeah, I agree with both of those points, and I went in a little bit of a different direction for offense. I kind of split it up between two players and same position group, and I went with Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. I looked at the Cardinals, and I think they have some big weaknesses on their team. I also think they have some nice strengths, but kind of that middle ground for me is the linebackers. It's, nothing crazy good, nothing crazy bad. Like I like Kaiser White, very solid off ball linebacker. I like that the addition of Mac Wilson. He was sort of an interesting chess piece for the Bill Belichick Patriots. So it'll be interesting to see how Jonathan Gannon uses them, but the Cardinals historically haven't been great against tight ends. I'm sure Jesus will, attest to that.
Yeah.
They gave up the second most touchdowns to tight ends last year, and I know it wasn't a very good defense on paper. Obviously, we're talking about probably the worst roster the Cardinals have maybe ever had going into last year. It was just sort of a rebuilding year, see what you have and move forward. And now that, like you said, they added some bodies on the D line, they added some in that area. They didn't really add to the linebacker room other than Mac Wilson. I look at as a team like the Cardinals who likes to play a lot of off zone, quarters covers. They called it like more than any team in the league last year. So
Hmm.
there's going to be, soft spots opening up underneath. I think Jonathan Gannon wants to make that a point of emphasis to sit back, keep things in front of you, obviously limit Josh Allen's arm. Um, obviously he's not going to do that all game. There will be those opportunities here and there, but I think for the most part, you're going to see the Cardinals kind of do that. And so I was very interested to see how, the Bills are going to deploy their tight ends. And I think there's going to be opportunity for Kincaid and Knox over the middle of the field, working into those soft zones in those areas where they're going to have to eat. If the Cardinals want Josh Allen to win this game, or if the Bills want Josh Allen to win this game, the Cardinals are gonna make him dink and dunk down the field. I just see that being their game plan. And as far as defense, I went with Daquan Jones. And I look at the Cardinals, and you go back to that second half, like you mentioned last year. Their rushing offense was phenomenal. It was extremely efficient, and obviously we didn't even get a fully healthy Kyler Murray. You saw like them kind of have the training wheel still on for him. He's still dealing
Yeah.
with an injury. They were trying to protect him. It was a rebuilding team. They weren't going to give you the full extent of Kyler Murray in his rushing game. But I think now that's going to be a dangerous area for the Cardinals. I think it's probably their biggest strength, tapping into Kyler's legs. You obviously drafted Trey Benson in the third round. You have James Conner, who I think is extremely underrated. And your offensive line isn't great, but it's good enough to support a very solid run game. And I think if you're the Bills, you need a player to step up and defend the run. And I think of Daquan Jones. When he was on the field for the Bills, their run stuff rate was up 6.7%. Their yards per carry they allowed less, almost half a yard less when he was on the field, and their defensive success rate was 3.1% higher when he was on the field. I think he does a lot of heavy lifting in the run game, and like you mentioned, Mike, with Terrell Bernard as the Mike backer, he's going to have a role. So I think it's going to be on them two to really kind of carry the load for this defense and see if they can handle that Cardinals rushing attack. And that's who I went with.
I think the Cardinals' biggest X factor for this game, besides Kyler Murray's dual threat ability, is going to be Trey McBride.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
see if he's truly going to be like that pivotal point in this offense, obviously besides Marv, to see like, okay, it's 3rd and 7, you know, obviously let's say they've been running the ball really well all game. Is Trey McBride going to be that guy that Kyler trusts in those moments?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
Actually, I'm glad you asked that because Jesus, I wanted to ask you, you got McBride, you got Marv, you know what those guys are. They're kind of like known quantities, I guess, to a lesser extent, Marv because he hasn't played yet. But outside of those two, I really like your wide receiver room. There's a lot of interesting names. You got Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch. I know Zay Jones is suspended right now, but who do you think is that third guy that kind of steps up into that role? Is it Michael Wilson? Is it Greg Dortch, sort of like a jitterbug, gadgety kind of player? Like, who do you view being that alternate option in case, one of those guys kind of gets bracketed and taken out of the play?
Well, kind of going what you guys are saying, we have Trey McBride. He broke out last year. Marv is new. Michael Wilson was a rookie last year. So I think Greg Dortch is kind of like the safety blanket right now for Kyler Murray. You saw last year when like Hollywood was out, we had Michael Wilson out, and it was just Greg Dortch, running routes out of the X receiver spot, and he was able to get open. Even though he's a smaller guy, I think he's like 5'7", 5'8", but he's able to he has a natural way of just catching the ball, and he's able to just make plays out of pretty much anything. Like if you give him a little bit of open space, he's able to juke out. He doesn't really go down, on the first tackle, on the first line of contact, and he just, powers his way through, as much as he can. So I think he'll be sort of that third guy. I'm really high on Michael Wilson. I think he'll be great just because I think Kyler with bigger receivers, Michael Wilson's 6'3", like he's a real stocky guy. Same thing with Marv. But I think, obviously you see Marv, he's a big like new shiny toy. You know what Trey McBride did last season, so they're all everyone's going to be focused on that. Obviously, with the run game, you have like Trey McBride. He's able to block. I think he's a really underrated blocker. James Conner, he's another big running back. So I think Greg Dortch, he's that third guy that many people might not consider him just because he is smaller guy. He's our slot guy, but he has a relationship with Kyler for the past, I think, like 3-4 years, and so he's been on the team. He's able to get reps, and they both know what each other wants. Whenever they do like their scramble drills and stuff like that, it always seems like Dortch is just at the perfect place just to catch the ball and turn around and make a few guys miss here and there. So I would say, like I said, Greg Dortch, and then kind of going back to what you guys are saying with the run game and everything. I think it's one of the key things that we have to do, as the Cardinals in order to just have a chance, in this game. And I think, going back to like last season when Kyler was in the game, I think, it just opens up so much room for him with his rushing ability, with him being able to throw the ball, and then just the way this offense wants to look. We have our offensive coordinator from he was a quarterbacks coach from the Browns, and so his whole mantra is basically just running the ball, kind of going off of like a Shanahan, the Eagles kind of playbook where they just dominate the run game, and then everything else just falls into place after that.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you had brought that up because it's a a concept and a lot of coaches run it around the league. It's kind of the Shanahan style system, a lot of wide zone, heavy play action, and I think that's really what the Cardinals want to be. I think they're at the point now they know what Kyler is. They paid him. A lot of people said, a lot of skeptics were like, "Oh, they're going to go draft a quarterback." The Cardinals stood by him. They've been standing by their guy, and I think the Cardinals want a situation where Kyler doesn't have to be Superman. And much like we have
Yeah.
the same discussion in our own fan base, and we kind of envy, the idea you guys are trying to create there. I like that because you don't need him to be Superman. Like I saw a podcast the other day and somebody had said boring wins, and that's exactly it. The
Yeah.
Cardinals don't need to be throwing a goal ball to, DeAndre Hopkins, unfortunately, at the end of a game to win. They need to tap into that running game. And obviously, Kyler is one of the best creators out of structure in the league. I don't even think that's debatable. Which leads me into the keys of the game. And so for me, I'll go three. We'll go three with Mike and me, and then we'll go down to Jesus for the Cardinals. I wanted to make it the point of emphasis. If the Bills are on defense, they need to keep Kyler in the pocket. Like that's got to be, I think, goal number one.
Mm-hmm.
Kyler out of structure is incredible. We've seen it many, many times, and I think people have forgotten how good he is when a play breaks down. Kyler can find a guy in a scramble drill. He can escape. He can run. He can do
He's
pretty
one of the
much
league's
everything.
best.
And, for a guy that's smaller, you would think, oh, he'd go down easy. No, Kyler is kind of like that. I think if you watch back and look at the Cowboys and what Tony Romo did a lot, escaping the pocket, he kind of spinned out, was really good at, dipping his hips and getting out of the pocket. Kyler's amazing at that. And I think if you're the Bills, you need to have that rush lane integrity, keep the guy in the pocket and force Kyler to play the drop back passing game. Because if you let him create and do what he does best, you're setting yourself up for failure, especially with the unit, much like the Cardinals is going through a lot of transition. You need these guys to be on the same page. And when a play breaks down, things get, ugly and wobbly. And Kyler thrives in those areas. And I think if you're the Bills, you need to keep him in the pocket. And, you're not going to be able to do it all game, but you need to at least limit him in that area. That was my first key to the game. My other one was limiting sort of the self-made mistakes. And that kind of goes it's kind of a cliche thing. A lot of teams can say it, but with the Bills especially, we know how Josh Allen is with the ball in the regular season. He puts it in harm's way and it costs them. And a young team like the Cardinals are going to use that as energy. They're young, they're hungry. They if they get a turnover, that's going to light a fire on them. They're going to be like, "Okay, maybe we can really win this game. We can really do this." And I think the Bills need to be careful. I think, Cardinals, like I said, they don't play a ton of man coverage or a lot of off zones. So there's going to be opportunity to just be patient. And if the Bills can stay patient, they won't run into those issues, but they really need to, clean up the self-inflicted errors. And, saw a lot in preseason, a lot of flags, a lot of ugliness. And so that was my other key to the game. And then obviously my last one was just winning on third down. And it's like much to what I said with Kyler, like when a play breaks down, you just need to be able to keep him in the pocket. And so the Bills need to put themselves in those situations where they're in favorable, down and distances. It's third and long for the Cardinals. It's not a scenario where it's 3rd and 4, where it's much easier for him to pick up that first down. So I'd like to win in those areas. And that's kind of my keys to the game. I'll go to Mike now, and then we'll kind of work our way over. But, where do you stand as far as your keys to the game? It might be the same, might be a little bit different, but what do you think the Bills need to do to win this game?
I think with the Bills, the three keys to the Bills trying to win this game are going to be trying to neutralize the run from the Cardinals. Trying to hold James Conner to a certain extent, because with that it'll open up the play action and many other plays downfield, and that just won't be a good recipe for success for the Bills. Another key to the game is for them to find like their true number one target. When it's second and long, when it's third down, who's going to be that guy that Josh is really going to turn to and, really decide to put his faith and trust in and see what's successful and what's not. And I actually have a key of the game for the Cardinals, actually. Big key to the game for the Cardinals, if they want to be successful in this game, is just going to be to fully unleash Kyler Murray. As we stated like earlier, Kyler Murray was more like they weren't really letting him go be everything that he could be last year, obviously with a really young team, and the record really wasn't that great. It's a new start, a lot of new weapons on this offense, a lot of depth, and for them to just see if he really can go out and be that guy. Go be that guy that went out and got that big contract. Go be the number one overall pick. Go be Kyler Murray.
Exactly. Jesus, I don't know if you kind of agree with that, but what would you say as far as the keys of the game?
Yeah, I would say for us on offense, kind of like what opposite what you guys are saying. I think we need to run the ball. I think that's one of the key things that helps this offense go. I remember a few years ago, I was watching an interview with Sean Payton, and he was saying, he was talking about it was Cardinals like early on in the season, and he was just saying that Kyler, he has to be super. I mean, everyone knows he has to be like Superman in years before just for us to be able to win games. And he says like his vision for like offenses and just with like quarterbacks like that is just to give them layups here and there, have them get in a rhythm. And after that, like obviously you're going to have, if you have a star quarterback and you guys know, he's going to make like those Superman plays. It has to come, almost naturally. You can't force him to do that every single play, every single quarter for a whole season. You have to, he's gonna go off, the high dive, on in the fourth quarter and third down and stuff like that when you got to have it. And if he just tries it too long, you've seen it with us where sometimes Kyler gets hurt and he has these like ankle injuries just because he's trying to make something out of nothing just because there's really nothing there. So I would say that establishing the run game, and I think the way I personally love the way this offense is looking, because I've always been a big believer that if you just get like a big target for Kyler Murray, he can make anyone work. Like in years before, he's had guys that are closer to 6 foot, like even smaller names like a Demir Bird or like a Pharaoh Cooper, just some guys that are barely over 6 foot, but he's able to make them work, and then they get paid afterwards. Same thing with like We had different tight ends like a Max Williams, or we had someone like a Dan Arnold, where we were able to make them work just because they were bigger targets. So now we have Trey McBride, who's 6'4", Marv, another 6'4" guy, Michael Wilson, 6'2", and we drafted another guy, Tip Ryman, he's 6'5". So a bunch of big body targets, for Kyler to kind of go off of. But with that Trey McBride pick, I think it just helps the run game immediately, because you're able to go into 21 personnel and just really have so many options in what you have to do. And I would say for us, a key thing on defense is to kind of force the Bills to kind of, you were saying, Michael, kind of force them to find their number one wide receiver, number one target, just because obviously Stephon Diggs is out of the picture, and it's a bunch of moving pieces. You guys don't have your slot receiver anymore, so just trying to find out who's going to have that connection with Josh Allen right away. If it'll be someone like a Kincaid, where kind of builds off of last year, or someone that's been there a while, maybe like a Knox, who maybe have that relationship before, and they're able to go off of that for the first game. But just kind of forcing Josh Allen to find his number one receiver. And I think with our defense is probably it's still trying to get traction, still trying
We're
to
getting
build.
there.
Yeah. Hopefully some of the young guys step up, but this secondary, it's a young secondary. Like, we have Sean Murphy Bunting, he's our vet, but outside of that, it's a bunch of either second year guys or a bunch of rookies or some undrafted guys. So just trying to get them to not cover as long, and that'll just be for defensive line, the front seven, just playing discipline, and then just hopefully some guys step up in that secondary.
Yeah, exactly. I think it goes for both sides of the ball. There's a lot of inexperience, and it's kind of interesting to see how it plays out. Who's going to be the guy that steps up? Especially like the Cardinals, like you'd mentioned. There's a lot of younger guys, and maybe even like a depth guy steps up that you don't expect, like a Star Thomas, or you know,
Mm-hmm.
you never know what can happen with these players, and it's going to be interesting to monitor, right? Obviously, you mentioned that defensive line and their ability to kind of help out that secondary, and it's going to be a big question mark. I think you obviously lost BJ Ojolari for the season. He was going to be an important rotational piece for you guys. You got the
Yeah,
rookie Darius Robinson. You have Zayvon Collins, who has now moved to edge. And then you have, like you said, Bilal Nichols, Justin Jones, like they're baseline level starters. They're not great, but
yeah,
they're much better than what you had. Um, there's some depth pieces for you. Kyrus Tonga was a guy that you guys picked up from, I think it was Minnesota, is an interesting name. I was watching. He showed some flashes when he's played, so he might be somebody that steps up. But I think that's really where the Cardinals are going to be tested in this game. If there's an area they need to probably worry about, it's that pass rush.
yeah,
If they're
Who
not getting
knows if
pressure
Monty
home, it's going to be
Ossenfort
a really long day.
yeah, who knows if
yeah,
Monty
definitely.
Ossenfort adds anybody, but I mean, it's very thin. I'm sure it's just an area where if you're going to go up against a team that has a really good quarterback, you want that pass rusher. And I think if there was any critique you had for the Cardinals in their offseason, I thought they had a very good offseason. It was probably to get a really good, number one pass rusher. Not even a really good number one, maybe a really good number two, like Chase Young or something like that, to just really take the burden off of having just that heavy rotation. And, it can work. We've seen it run around the league. Obviously, the Bills do it themselves. They don't really have that number one star pass rusher. They have just a bunch of dudes, and it works. It's not great, but, it gets the job done. So I'm curious for you, like, how big of a concern is that for you guys? Like, obviously, you lost Ojolari. There's not many names out there. I mean, maybe, Yannick Ngakoue or somebody like that, but
Why do you think they didn't go out and fulfill that need this
I don't
offseason?
know. That's what I want to ask you, Jesus. Like, what caused them, do you think, not to address that?
I think I think they were in on some guys like a Danielle Hunter, like a Jonathan Grenard, but I just think they weren't willing to put that price out there to give him that contract, considering the type of play that they're getting. And then also too, they're just, not saying that these weren't, good guys, but they're also, looking for a certain type of guy. And they've said it, throughout last offseason, this offseason, where they want guys that are obsessed with football and just being football junkies, and they just want a certain type of player, at least early on right now, just to change that culture and just to carry on the standard in the building. But yeah, a lot of people have been saying it's just like a position that they just haven't really addressed. They're kind of, in my eyes, I guess they were trying to look to see if someone like a Zayvon Collins or someone like a BJ Ojolari would pop off. But even at that point, like if you were just have no injuries at that position, it was still going to be a struggling position regardless. Like we don't have a guy that could rush the quarterback. And for me, that's one of the key things that I think, for any team, if you're rebuilding or not, like you got to have a quarterback, you got to have a line to protect the quarterback, and you got to have, someone to rush the other team's quarterback. That's one of the three things I think is important for every single team. And we don't have that third part. And, obviously we raised the floor with our defensive line. Like you said, we last season, we didn't really have many names. Like I said, it was just undrafted guys and just a bunch of rookies. But now we kind of raise that floor, and they're able to hopefully manage like the interior rush. But outside of that, like we'll have a Dennis Gardeck rushing, which he's not going to scare anyone. We have a Zayvon Collins. This is his second season at this new position, so it'll be really difficult. I think Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis, they could generate some sort of pass rush with blitzes and stuff like that, or just scheme overall. But it's not going to be enough for someone like a Josh Allen, where he's seen a bunch of different things. He's athletically gifted, where he could just go, and he's a big guy
You
too.
don't want to
He could
blitz
just
Josh Allen.
yeah, like you don't want to do that. You don't want to sacrifice someone in the coverage just to generate a quicker pass rush, which it's something that we might have to do. It's something that they have probably been working on for the past couple of weeks. And then yeah, I think if for you guys too, if you guys start with the run game and stuff like that, I know Cook, he had a solid season last season. If he goes and builds off of that, I think it'll just be rough if the ball keeps on staying in Josh Allen's hand and we can't get out the field on defense. So I think that that'll be one of the things that we have to focus on. And yeah, you just trying to stop them with a bunch of guys that we could just rotate in and out. I think that's their key for that's their vision for this defense as of now.
Yeah, I definitely want to say that design pressure is probably going to be where a lot of that production is made. Like you said, like there's not really a guy, Dennis Gardex, he's all right. He led the team in sacks last year, but that's not something you're going to be very proud of. But
Yeah,
it's interesting to see what Gannon will do. I think there's a little bit of a similarity between him and Sean McDermott in the sense where they kind of elevate a little bit. We don't really know what his ceiling is yet, Gannon, so I don't want to go that far. McDermott's ceiling, we talked about it at great length on this podcast. It's, we think it's very limited as a defensive play caller, especially somebody who's not like an elite defensive mind. Time will tell with Gannon, but I think at the very least he can elevate some of those guys and he can at least try to, create some, pressure with some of those design blitzes, some of those,
yeah,
bring out a safety in there or whatever, a nickel or whatever you want to do. So I think, like you said, that's probably going to be the biggest way for them to rush the passer, which isn't obviously a great way to win, but it's not also the end all be all. Um, anyways, I think that pretty much covers it for the keys of the game. I think, like you said, I think this game will really be determined in the trenches, like who's going to win. There's a lot of moving parts, especially on your offensive line. You got Jonah Williams, who you added in there, and you have some younger pieces. Paris Johnson was moved back to his original position in left tackle. And
yeah,
the Bills obviously went out and made a couple tweaks on their offensive line. They moved Connor McGovern to center. David Edwards is starting at guard. So there's, I think, a good amount of question marks. So it'll be interesting to see which unit kind of holds up and is able to kind of step up and deliver on game day. So that we'll kind of branch off that and go into sort of the strengths and weaknesses of each team. I think we've kind of talked about a lot of the areas these teams could improve on. But we'll kind of start by talking about the strengths and then wrap up any other weaknesses we may want to add. I'll start, I guess, with the Bills and their strengths in this game. I want to say it's not really any one player, or I think it's more of what they do, and it's the play action offense. I think the Bills play action, when they do it well, are probably the best team at running play action in the league, because you have to respect Josh Allen in the sense where, well, if they're running the ball, we need to send as many bodies as we can because this guy is so hard to bring down. Well, if he's throwing deep, it's almost impossible to keep up with his arm because he's got probably the strongest arm in the league. So it's really, really difficult for teams to kind of understand how and when they're going to use their play action. So I think the Cardinals will be tested, especially their linebackers, Kaiser White, Mac Wilson, Chris Barnes. Like, those guys are really going to be put to the test, especially from the Bills offense and Josh Allen. Like, can you handle this or can you not? And like, much like I said earlier with the tight ends, like, I think there's going to be a lot on their plate in this game. And I think they can really, dictate how the plan works for the Cardinals defense in this opening game. And so I think, yeah, that play action will be a huge point of emphasis for the Bills, especially in the new team. You got to, a lot of this has to be schemed up. A lot of our players aren't, like, especially you look at a guy like Keon Coleman, he's not really going to separate naturally. You got to kind of scheme him open and kind of use his athletic tools after the catch and his big catch radius that way. And then I look at the trenches. I think the Bills do have the better team on both sides of the ball, offensive line, defensive line. I'll allow you to have your opinion on that, but I think the Bills have a little bit more continuity on the offensive line. Defensive line, they have more continuity, and I think that does play a big advantage, especially early in the season, where you can kind of go back to having that chemistry with these teammates years prior, seasons prior, and kind of use that for yourself. And as far as the Cardinals goes, there's a lot of moving pieces there in their defensive line, like we've mentioned multiple times now. I do think that is a huge, huge advantage for the Bills to take care of. And then I would say you can probably say the same thing with the Cardinals, but it's like I mentioned as well, the inexperience at the back end of the Bills defense. You have some young players and Christian Benford and Kyrie Elam. We'll see how much he plays, and then obviously Dorian Williams, who's starting at weak side, offside, or off-ball linebacker, he'll be put to the test, and then obviously the receivers. So there's a lot of unknown with the Bills. So we don't really know who's going to step up in a sense, because we really just don't know with a lot of these players because they're just unproven. So I want to go to Mike now. I don't know if you kind of agree with that same sentiment, but I'll let you start with the weaknesses and kind of work your way back to the strengths. What would you say is the Bills' biggest weakness right now in this game?
I would say the Bills' biggest weakness right now is not knowing what they're going to be getting out of their safeties, not knowing how they're going to be able to, mask certain coverages, whether or not they can just keep up with what's seemingly probably going to be a pretty pass-happy offense now with Marv, with McBride, with obviously mentioned earlier, Greg Dortch being able to be versatile in so many things. I feel like that safety group is just going to have a really big test week one against this offense. And another big weakness is going to be the receiver room. Obviously, you don't really know what you're going to get. Obviously, there's a very high ceiling, but we don't know what that floor is yet. And hopefully we don't have to find out this week.
Exactly. And
And
then go
the
ahead.
biggest strength for me, you said you weren't going to break it down to one player, but for me, it is one player, and it's Josh Allen.
Yeah,
Josh Allen should eat. He just should go nuclear this game. I fully anticipate Josh Allen having a very good game against this pass rush. And if they do, seemingly have to scheme up blitzes in order to get pressure, for me, I just think it's over. Personally, for
yeah,
me, Josh Allen against the blitz is just one of the game's best, and putting his back against the wall only seems to make him play better. So
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like that's the biggest
I
strength for
I I
me.
couldn't have put it better myself. Especially a lot. You see a lot of teams like to run zero against him, and he's every time he's countering it with, "Oh, I'm going to run 50 yards on the field." You saw it in the
If
playoffs
if you're
against
gonna
this.
blitz Josh Allen, he's gonna get 3 touchdowns, 350 scrimmage yards, and it's just gonna be a really long
And
day.
that's kind of the thing. Even if you do have that elite pass rusher, it still might not be enough.
Yeah.
Like we saw TJ Watt, like he had his hand in the game, but like there's just only so much you can do. Like
hmm
he's so tough to bring down. I think he's probably the best physically talented quarterback we've ever seen. I might be biased, but I just think with all those traits added together, it's just so difficult for a lot of these people to really get them down on the ground. I'll go to Jesus now. We'll start with your strengths and then kind of work your way over the weaknesses. But as far as your strengths go, we've tapped into the running game. We've talked about that at great length. But what would you say is probably the biggest strengths for the Cardinals in this game, and why?
I would say the strength is probably like the versatility on offense, just because, like I said before, we have so many, big targets that we could use just throughout the field. You know, Starting off with Marv, he's going to be like our main, X receiver. He's, 6'4", 210, 215, but he runs somewhat like someone that's 5'10". He has fluid hips. He's able to get low. And you saw it, last year when he was at Ohio, and then just throughout practice clips here and there, he's able to move just so fluidly. And then you have another option, right next to him in Michael Wilson, where he's like another big guy, 6'2", 220. He's, built crazy. And then you have someone like a Trey McBride, and you have James Conner is 6'1", 6'2", McBride 6'4". So just having the versatility of, hey, now we have sort of someone that you
Size.
guys have to respect. Yeah, someone you have to respect in the pass game, because last year it was like Hollywood Brown, you had Greg Dortch, you had a young Michael Wilson that he was trying to get into it, but outside of that, we've always had like just smaller receivers around us. So now that you have someone that you have to, respect, someone like a Marv, and then someone that broke out like a Trey McBride. And then, even if like you guys have them covered, we'll just go back to our default, which is the run game. And, I think our offensive line too, I think it's better than what a lot of people give it credit for, but especially in the run game, I think they're one of the best units. When Kyler came back last year, they were, I think, number one in rush yards expected, but before contact. So they're able to create a lot of good push, and just their rushing total offense throughout the whole year was I think ranked top 4 or top 5, something like that, in the whole league. So just having that, and just having that as a default just in your back pocket. Like, we know, I think, what our offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, wants to do. He has that identity where he wants to run the ball, but he's not afraid to use our targets outside, or use someone, in the middle of the seam, like a Trey McBride. And even if you guys have the run game covered and all the outside stuff, we have an underneath guy in Greg Dortch that you give him space, he's able to operate. So just the versatility on offense, I think, is our biggest strength, just because there's so many different options that we could go to. And then if all else fails, we have Kyler, who could just make plays like Josh Allen, and just able to get out, outside of the tackles, and just create plays. But for us, I think the biggest weakness would be like that pass rush, and that defensive line. I think our secondary, I'm kind of higher on, just because I think Jonathan Gannon, he's able to elevate the secondary. Like, we've seen it in Philadelphia, we've seen it in when he was with the Vikings, when he was with the Colts, whatever position group he's able to be at, I think they all pretty much elevate that year he's there. And same thing that happened in Philly, where you guys had, or they had, a few guys here and there that probably weren't known names, but then they went to the Super Bowl just because they were able to play sound in the back end. So I think that group is better than what a lot of people, even Cardinals fans, think, just because there's a lot of unknowns. But that defensive line and the edge rushers, is just a glaring weak spot, and everyone sees it, that they're not a good group, and we just have to hopefully hold on, just play play sound football, just hopefully keep Josh Allen in the pocket as much as he can, and then use someone like a Buda Baker, or like a Kaiser White to take away the tight ends. And then you guys mentioned him before, Mac Wilson. I think he'll be pretty versatile in that front seven. If he's there, he could rush the passer like he did in New England, but just using as many different fronts as we can, I think would be a key for the defense. But yeah, it's just a glaring weakness that we have right now. And I think Gannon, yeah, I kind of thought about this when he was in Philly. Like, they kind of built the offense first. They traded for AJ Brown. They kind of built the offensive line, got everything set, and afterwards they went ahead and traded for like a Hassan Reddick. They went out and got a few pieces here and there where Gannon's like, all right, you guys got everything in the offense fixed. Now, let's get this defense in the back end. And then they went to create a really good team that year. So I think they're sort of doing a similar thing here where we got the offense good. I think right now our offense is pretty much set. So now we're going to take the next year to see who's going to be on this defense. And then hopefully in the offseason, start adding pieces. But yeah, that defensive line and edge rusher group is going to be one of the key things that I'm looking at whenever we're on defense to see if anyone's going to be able to step up, or if hopefully no one makes a mistake and just play as perfect as you can, because that's the only way that we'll have a chance is them playing basically perfect football if they can.
Right. Do you anticipate Marv to come out the gate running? Like, do you anticipate him being like one of the league's best this season?
I don't think so, just because I think he'll have over. I think like his over under right now is set like at 1,000 or 1,100 yards.
For
I
week
think
one, his
he'll
over
get
under on
that.
yards is 64 and a half.
Yeah, I think he'll. I don't know if he'll get that week one, but I think overall he'll have a solid season. Nothing like we've seen the past couple of years, like a Puka or like
Or a Chase.
a Garrett, yeah, Chase, or I think Garrett Wilson. They also had a really solid season. So I think you're not going to see anything like that. But just because our offense is so like we're not overly dependent on Marv now. Like we had a Trey McBride that broke out. We have James Conner in the back pocket whenever we need to use them. And I think this offense is real run heavy, run first. And I think that's their identity. I love that they have an identity now where it's like, all right, we're going to beef up the offensive line, tight ends, receivers that could also run block, great. And we're able to run it as many times as we want. And that's, we saw it last year where they were able to just run the ball and just use that to sort of get into a rhythm. But I think I don't think he'll have amazing numbers. You're just like, oh wow, like he's gonna put up 1,300 yards. But I think he'll have plays where it'll be like, okay, that's why they chose him fourth overall. He looks great. It's just the box score numbers stats aren't going to be there right now.
Yeah,
What do you one more thing. So
Yeah.
obviously we've talked about the running game a lot and James Conner and Kyler Murray. One name I haven't really heard you mention all that much is Trey Benson. What do you think Trey Benson's role in this offense is going to be, and what do you think we can expect from him this season?
I think he's going to be, obviously if James Conner goes down, he'll be the guy that's right up there. But I think as long as James Conner's healthy, he's not really going to see as much playing time. I think the way they want to run this offense is obviously James Conner. He's going to be the workhorse. He's like an old school running back where you got to build him up throughout the game, and then like the second half, end of the third quarter, fourth quarter, he'll be those guys that's like, all right, now he's getting into a motion. He's able just to go off, and then kind of like the second guy to like a James Conner, which is a big bruiser back. We have someone like a Amari Demercado, where he's Demercado. He was an undrafted rookie where he's a little more shiftier. I think he'll be sort of that number two guy. And then I feel like the only way we'll really see Trey Benson in a big like workload is if James Conner goes down. And James Conner has gone down a few times. He does miss like at least 3-4 games every single season. Yeah. So we're gonna see him, I think eventually in the middle of the season. But outside of that, I think
Do you think he
be
could
sort
take
of
that backfield in those moments of opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've seen it, in the preseason and last year at Florida. He has good vision, and I think just the way he runs, I think he looks almost exactly like a younger James Conner. Obviously with a smaller body, but just the way he runs physically, and then he brings the receiving ability too. That James Conner, I think he does have a good receiving ability, and I think he's underrated with that. But I think we've seen it more here in Arizona than what we did in Pittsburgh. But I think Trey Benson is going to be more of that all around back that you're not going to need like a Dermacado, or you're not going to need someone like a Michael Carter that comes in and kind of takes those third down abilities. But I think once the timing comes up perfectly where like after this year, James Conner, his contract is up. So Trey Benson should be that guy that comes in next season and just takes the whole workload. But yeah, the with the running game, James Conner, he'll be the workhorse back. It just take 90-85% of the rushing snaps right now.
Yeah, I would say I really liked how Monty Ossenfort had built that offense. It's really well structured in terms of everybody really having a role and a niche in that offense. Like you
Yeah,
got, like you said, Marv's like your true number one wide receiver. You know, Dortch can kind of play a little bit more in the slot, and then you got Michael Wilson, who's kind of who you're hoping to be the number two. You have Zay Jones as insurance in case that doesn't work out. And
hmm
then obviously, you get McBride and then Tip Raymond, sort of that perfect number two, hopefully for you guys who can be like that really tough blocker, really good athlete for you guys. And then, like you said, with Trey Benson, it's a really good plan to have in place for James Conner. You can kind of almost in a sense redshirt this year. Just he'll have some experience, but he'll
yeah.
I mean, the Cardinals love using James Conner. He'll have an extremely high usage rate, and yeah, I think that was really a really good job that was done by the Cardinals this offseason. And I think there was some question marks about Monty Ossenfort and what he would be able to do for the Cardinals, and I really think he delivered this offseason for you guys. And there's obviously still a long way to go, but I think you're definitely trending in the right direction. So I wanted to ask you, we'll leave on this and we'll kind of get our score predictions. What would you deem a successful season for the Cardinals this year? Is it making the playoffs? Is it finishing, I don't know, 8-9, 9-8? What for you shows the growth and the progress that you need to see out of this team this year?
I think I think for me, I'm kind of tempering expectations just because this defense is still super young, and I think they're just like I said that front seven outside of like a Kaiser White, it's super unknown. You don't know. Obviously, if they play great, like if they play, how you hope they could play, is going to turn out all right. But that's sort of the ceiling is they'll just be average at that point. A lot of people around the Cardinals community right now they're thinking, oh, we have to make the playoffs and that's sort of like a successful season and build off of that. But I think if you go around like 8-9 wins, that'll be a pretty successful season just for the fact like I said, it's still a new offense, right? Only Kyler he was here for the last 8 games of the season, and at that point he was still coming off the ACL, still trying to his body making it feel back to normal, and then you add someone like a Marv, they have to build their connection, and the offensive line is changing, right? We have Paris at the left tackle, you have Jonah Williams at right tackle, and then you have a brand new left guard, whoever that would be. I think right now it's Evan Brown, but outside of that, still have moving pieces. And then this defense is just super young. I think it's still a year away. I put it out there like on Instagram, on Twitter. I think they're still a year away on defense. So I think 8-9 wins, if playoffs, that'd be great. Just because the NFC is still it's weaker than the AFC, and it's going to be a little bit easier getting in. Like if you saw someone like Tampa Bay make it in last year, I think the Cardinals could squeeze in if they make that last seed. But I think 8-9 wins would be great. I think that would be a very solid season. Playoffs would be fantastic, but I'm not sold on if it's playoffs or bust this year. I think the offense is going to be, I think is going to be a top five offense in terms of like you're able to be so versatile and they're able to put up points. It's just the defense is going to be just holding them down way too much. And even if they trade for someone before the trade deadline, I don't think I think hopefully that would be an edge rusher, but at that point you don't even know if it'll be like a defensive lineman or another just secondary edge rusher that they just sign instead of trade for. So just so many questions with this defense is just we'll have to wait until next offseason to hopefully, in this upcoming draft, it looks like there's going to be a lot of defensive linemen and a lot of just defense in general. So hopefully we're able to tap into that. But yeah, right now, 8-9 wins seems like for me, that'll be the goal. I'm optimistic that the offense will be great, but I being realistic with where this team was last year, where Monty Ossenfort, tore down everything and just has to rebuild it from the ground up. And rebuilds don't happen in one offseason.
Right.
They'll take drive. Even though we've had think this past draft we had maybe like 8, 9 draft. I think it was like no, not like 9 or 10 draft picks, and the one before that it was like 8 or 9. So we have an influx of young players. We just gotta wait for them to develop and sort of get the ball moving on that. And next year, hopefully, it'll be playoffs, and then building off of that.
Right. Yeah, and I think as a fan of a team that missed the playoffs for the better part of, well,
17
more than a
years.
decade, like,
Hmm.
you patience is hard, but I think the Cardinals, they're doing the right things. A lot of people are writing you guys off, but, I think they're doing it the right way. Steve Keim didn't put you guys in a great position at all. He handicapped you with some really bad contracts and really bad decisions. For some reason, he likes
Yeah.
to draft an inside linebacker every year. I don't know why, but yeah, so I mean, it's obviously it's much improved. It seems like there's a direction and a plan, and like knowing that, I think as a fan, that seemed a lot of dysfunction with our other sports team and hockey team that's been really bad for a long time. That's besides the point. Like you feel comfortable in that sense where you know that this team has a vision and a goal, and they're working their way towards it, and it's exciting. It's very exciting. So I wanted to
What about for you
go.
guys?
What
So
was that?
what about for you guys? What do you think the expectations would be? Obviously, it's a huge change, in the offense, losing your top two guys, and then the defense. Maybe I'm not seeing it well, but I think this game would be sort of more offensive heavy. I think both defenses lack a sort of like top defense or top players on defense, and you guys lost a bunch of your secondary too. So, what would your guys' expectations be for the season? And then, after the season, what about for the game?
I'll
Can I
let
go
Mike
first?
first.
I feel it just depends honestly, it just depends where Josh Allen's going to take this team. If he plays
Hmm.
the way that he can play, the sky's the limit. When it comes to regards to the defense, I feel like I'm okay with where our defensive line is at. There's still a lot of question marks to where that ceiling can be for them, but I really love their floor. And I feel like the biggest question mark for the defense is just going to be the safeties and the secondary, and obviously just try to stay healthy this year and not get completely gutted, like last year where you're starting, you know, 9 backups on defense.
Mm.
I feel like my anticipation or my expectations for this team this year is to win at least 10 games and make it to the second round of the playoffs. I mean, if they can't at least do that, they got to get rid of Sean McDermott. It's time for him to go.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I would.
So you're sort of expecting kind of like just Josh Allen put on your Superman cape and just take this team as far as it can.
He has to. I mean, if he doesn't, like, what else, what is his team really? Like, without Josh Allen, the Bills are like a 4-win team,
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so without him playing like an MVP like he typically does every season, nothing else really matters.
Yeah, I'm right there with you too because yeah, I kind of have the same expectation where 10 or 11 wins, like I'm perfectly content with, just because I know that this team ceiling isn't very high, even with Josh Allen. But Josh Allen will elevate. He always has. I mean, he's obviously, unfortunately, been a victim of a defensive head coach, which I think it's been a widely discussed topic around the league. It's like, well, what's your ceiling truly with a defensive coach? And I think Sean McDermott's done a lot of great things for the Bills. I'm not going to take away from him, but yeah, I think certainly the alarms are going off right now. I think if he isn't able to get this team, if you're wasting a year of Josh Allen's prime per se, and you're taking away from what his greatness can be and limiting him, I think that's just a mistake. I know that they're going through a financial reset and they have to kind of do some of these things, but if it ends up really biting them back, they don't win the division or they don't even win a playoff game, I think there has to be a lot of questions asked about
They
this.
can't
Not only
afford to
just this,
take a major step back. They
it's
really
not
can't.
only just about this coaching staff. I think you got to start pointing some questions at the front office, being like, okay, what's your game plan here? What's the goal?
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, it should be just winning a Super Bowl every year. You have Josh Allen, like I'm sure as a Cardinals fan, like having that quarterback, like you had Kurt Warner, you had even Carson Palmer for a while. Like you have to take advantage of those years that you have this really good quarterback, and you need to build a team around him. And if you waste any of it, it could be a really big mistake. So Time will tell, obviously, but I hope that, 10 or 11 wins is what we end up with. I think that's probably what we'll end up with because it's Josh Allen, and I think he will some of these games into existence for the Bills and just pull them out for him. So I expect probably a playoff win in 11 wins, but that might be too hopeful. Some people might not don't even think we're going to make the playoffs. So I think it's a wide range of outcomes people expect for this team, but who knows? I mean, I
If
think
they don't make the
there's
playoffs, the entire fan base is truly going to be looking for Sean McDermott's head.
I
They
would
were already
say,
starting to look for it before that Eagles game last year, where it was like, okay, what's happening?
yeah.
Why is this happening?
And
It
that's
shouldn't be
with a team
happening.
that was expected to not that had higher expectations than the team we have now. So the question is like, how is he going to handle less talent, less star power? Are they going to maintain that level of consistency where they're at least winning a playoff game and winning the division, or is it going to get really worse? So I think that's really the biggest question that Sean McDermott and the staff has to answer this season. And I think, week one, like this is probably one of the biggest wild card games. Like just because there's a lot of turnover with each team. The Cardinals are in a sense adding a lot of players, and the Bills in a sense are losing a lot of players. Not that it's all bad. Some of it is good because they needed to get younger, but you really don't know what these teams are yet. So it's going to be a fun, exciting week one matchup just because there's just so much unknown. And I want to start with you, Mike. As far as your score prediction goes, do you expect it to be sort of this track meet where there's a lot of points scored? Do you see it somewhere in the middle? Do you see it being a low scoring game? Like, what's your score prediction? Give us the numbers and why you think that.
I think it's going to be a 31-24 win for the Bills. I just think it's really going to come down to the turnover battle.
Mhm.
Who cannot turn over the ball the most and who can capitalize on those opportunities if they do.
Right.
And yeah, I do think it'll be a relatively like semi-high scoring game. Like it won't be like something crazy, but
Yeah. Jesus, what do you think?
Well, right now, I think the Cardinals could win it. Um, I'm really, like I said, I'm really high on this offense. I think if the offense can just hold the ball, it the way it kind of shapes out in my head, if we are able to win it, it'll be running the ball, just having the ball out of Josh Allen's hands as much as possible, and then giving the defense time to take a break. Because a lot of times last year, before Kyler came in, it was a lot of 3 and out, and the defense is right back on the field. And with the defense that doesn't have many players on that are able to, are household names, or just able to just get home, maybe get a sack or get a turnover. You just got to have them as fresh as possible. And I think this offense is built to do that. Is built to get time out of the clock and able to put up points whenever they can. So I think, like I said, kind of agreeing with Michael. I think it'll be a high scoring game. I think it'll be close. I think the Cardinals squeeze it out 30-27, and it'll be just one of those things where, yeah, Josh Allen, he was playing great. It's just he wasn't able to hold on. He wasn't able to have sort of the ball last, and just the offense, the Cardinals
not
offense sort
again.
of just controlled the game.
Not
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are probably going to think you're crazy because it is an upset. But to your point, the Bills have not been a good Week One team for the past few years now. Like you go back to last year, Monday Night Football against the Jets, it was an utter disaster. Josh Allen throws 4 picks. The team just can't move the ball. They lose to Zach Wilson. That in itself just really put me in a bad spot. But like even the Steelers game a few years ago, Big Ben, like they weren't expected to do much. They
Melvin
lost.
Ingram looked like prime Lawrence Taylor.
It was bad. So I mean, there's a lot that could happen. They could lose this game. Um,
And I also, one more thing to add.
yeah,
I
go ahead.
think just for us, seeing that we had the Bills week one, I think was sort of a relief, just because obviously we're not getting you guys in horrible weather at the end of the season. Also, just trying to see how that connection. I mean, for both of you guys too, a question: who do you think would be the number one guy to look for? When you guys are on offense, would it be someone like a Shakir or Curtis Samuel or a Keon Coleman to look for, or would it be the tight ends like a Kincaid, or
Got to be
would it be
Kincaid.
like a big
Yeah.
two tight end sets with Kincaid and Knox being there for a while?
Has to be
I
Kincaid.
think it's a lot of people expect it to be Kincaid. They used a really good draft pick on him a year ago. They were comfortable letting go of Stephon Diggs, trading him to a rival in a sense.
A
And
contender.
they let Gabe Davis went to technically a rival. Like these teams are competing in the AFC trying to win a Super
Yeah.
Bowl. That's their goal. The Bills felt comfortable enough to do that because they believe in Dalton Kincaid. I think he ultimately is going to be the number one target. I think he leads the team in targets at the end of the year. I don't know, like as far as yards or touchdown goes, but I definitely think he leads the team in receptions and targets. I just think he's going to be sort of that space eater over the middle, kind of just be a really reliable option for Josh Allen. And in case the play breaks down, I can rely on this guy. We've seen it a couple times even his rookie year. Josh Allen and him were really money on scramble drill and working it. And I think you even go back to the Bengals game, which wasn't a great game for the Bills, but Dalton Kincaid had a really nice game because Josh Allen was able to find him, and the rest of his receivers weren't able to get open, and they were able to just hang in with the Bengals, who they haven't done very well historically against. So because Kincaid was able to find out a nice role in that offense. So I
Kincaid
think
could open up
Kincaid,
a lot of opportunities for those other
he
guys behind the
should.
scene,
He
for
really
Shakir.
should.
That's
And
my
so yeah, I think to answer your question, it's Kincaid. As far as my score prediction, I would lean the Bills. I mean, probably all of us are biased here, but I mean, I
Yeah.
would say 26-20 Bills. I don't expect it to be super high scoring. Especially in week one, like I don't expect these offenses to really have, their full strength, their full firepower yet. I expect it to be moderately scoring. Like it's not going to be, I don't know what the line's at right now. I don't know what the over-under's
six
at,
and a
but
half.
6.5. I don't know what the over-under's at, but I would say it's going to be very close. I would say in the mid-20s is probably what I expect. And I do think the scenario where the Cardinals win is if they are able to control the clock, run the ball the way they want to, and play mistake-free football, which, it sounds easy. It's not usually for most teams.
Hmm.
But the simplicity in that could really set themselves up in a good position to win this game. And you think back to a lot of the Bills games, they usually play down to the strength of their opponent. Even last year, they played against the Chargers, and I think it was Easton Stick starting at
Yep.
quarterback for them, and we
Yep.
barely beat them. So it
2
just
days
shows you
before
any given
Christmas.
Sunday, that's how this works. And I think the Cardinals, if they stick to the three things I mentioned, they'll have a good chance. And I'm sure you agree, but yeah, that's what I would do. That's what I would say, and I mean that pretty much finishes it up. I did want to ask you a question, Aziz, because I was checking out your page the other day,
Yeah.
and I was seeing a couple things. Now I noticed that Pat McAfee thought that you were Michael Bidwell. Can you talk to us about a little bit like that? Did Pat ever reach back out to you? Like, what was that whole situation like?
Yeah, it was during the off season when we are sort of transitioning off of Steve Keim and looking at who's going to be the next, face of this franchise in the front office. If it was going to be, some people from the Bears, some people from the 49ers, and just throughout the whole thing, they were talking about, what type of owner Michael Biddle is. And, I'm not too big on Michael Biddle. I think he's all right. I think he's a lot better than what his father was. His father sort of made this franchise look like, um, for lack of a better word, cheap. So they weren't really paying players. They didn't want to, pay their own guys. Facilities were cheap. I think, Bidwell was sort of Michael Bidwell now. I think he's sort of, trapped, or he was guided in the wrong direction with Steve Keim. So he's like, all right, Steve Keim, you've been here for a while. You do what you do. And he just was running the franchise to the ground. I think, Michael Biddle's done what in a sense, what he has to do, but no one was really telling him, hey, we got to rebuild this, we got to do that. He would just, if we needed players, he would sign players. There's not a big deal with that. Like he's able to give out big contracts to receivers, to free agents, stuff like that. But I was sort of defending him where they were kind of like, hey, Michael Bidwell, he hasn't rebuilt this, he hasn't done that. The facilities are trash. And I was saying, no, I forgot, it was something on Twitter where he posted a clip, and then I just went ahead and said, yeah, he does pay players. That's not a thing. Obviously, he has to keep it up, but I think it was more of him being naive instead of just like not wanting to do something. And then on the next day, I was just going about it. I just tweeted out there, put it, and then I had people DMing me like, oh, Pat McAfee was talking about you, and so I was like, man, I was like, oh, I wonder what happened if they're just making fun of me. And so I went on there, and yeah, he was like, oh, you Michael Biddle's burner. We know Michael Biddle has a burner. It's called Cardinals Update, and he's just trying to push out positive Michael Biddle propaganda. And at that point, it was, I was like, oh, that's cool. He kind of shouted me out, and then that year, the Super Bowl was here in Arizona, so he was doing like local interviews with like Arizona reporters, and he was like, "Oh, like you guys Cardinals update." So he kept on like just mentioning, just like a little sort of bit that was going on that off season where he was just trying to find out who Cardinals update was during Radio Row in the Super Bowl, and he was just asking a bunch of people here and there, and he just kind of lightheartedly just making fun at fans, just having the back of the organization instead of the players. So it
Yeah.
was just a cool little interaction, and it was fun for that off season, just kind of
Yeah.
going back and forth with them.
Yeah, I'm glad you told us. I was really curious about that. I'm like, how the hell did this guy get mentioned by Pat McAfee? It's
Yeah,
like that's a crazy thing to happen. Like he's pretty big. He's on ESPN now, so that's cool. I'm glad you told us that story. I'm like, that's very interesting. So yeah, I mean that's kind of pretty much covers it. I mean, I'm glad you came on, Jesus. It was a lot of
I
fun.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think it's going to be a very fun game this week. Me and Mike will both be in attendance for it, so we're looking forward to it.
Nice.
It'll be an electric atmosphere as always, and it should be a good game. At the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be like some crazy blowout or anything like that. I think it will be relatively close, and it should be some good football played this Sunday. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on. It was a pleasure, guys. Please check him out if you want to stay in tune with the Cardinals. He does a great job. Just
Thank
follow him
you.
on Twitter. His links will be in the description and everything, and please check him out. It was a lot of fun, guys, and good luck this season, Jesus. You guys have a great year, and yeah, we'll see you later. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys, and thanks for having me on.
Mhm.